Hey, what is up? Welcome to this episode of the Wantrepreneur to Entrepreneur podcast. As always, I'm your host, Brian Lofrumento, and I'll tell you what, to start the new year off, we have got some incredible guests here on the show in January, all throughout this month, and today's guest is no different because he is amazing at what he does. He has so much experience in so many different regards of business and entrepreneurship and startups. So today, we're going to go into a topic that we've not really discussed much on this show's history, but that is franchising. I know so many of you listeners, you always reach out to us asking about different business models, quicker ways to get started, and today's guest is incredible when it comes to franchising and all of the knowledge that drives successfully starting or opening a franchise. So today's guest, his name is Andy Baker. Andy is a multi-venture entrepreneur. He is the founder and CEO of Pacific Franchise Advisors and the founder and CEO of Rise Health Group. He has extensive experience in entrepreneurship, business development, management, operations, sales, and marketing in both large corporate environments and small startup organizations. And one piece of messaging that I really liked from Andy's businesses as I was doing my research today is when it comes to franchising, Andy's take on it is that you get to start a business for you, but not a business where you have to start alone. So I really love his angle on franchising. I'm so excited to learn from him as well here today. So I'm not going to say anything else. Let's dive straight into my interview with Andy Baker. All right, Andy, I am so excited that you're here with us today. Welcome to the Wantrepreneur to Entrepreneur podcast.
Hey, thanks, Brian. Happy to be here.
Heck yeah. And like I said in the intro, we have had way too many episodes without talking about franchising. It's been a hot topic from our listeners, so I know they're keen on today. But first things first, take us beyond the bio. Give us the short version of your story, how you fell into all of these incredible business experiences that you have in running your own business and helping people when it comes to franchising.
Yeah, well, gosh, just about me. So I live right here in Southern Oregon. Got a wife and two kids, and we're a sports and outdoors family. And then, we're right now in the middle of basketball season. So I've been coaching that on and off for about 23 years now. So it makes me feel a little old and saying it that way. But I got started in franchising actually back in 2005. And, it was kind of, as I got started in business, it was in corporate America. I worked for a large automotive consolidator, ran a large region of their stores and advertising and, was affected by the financial crisis. And as that happened, as many of us do, we think, there's got to be something more than this, right? It's like, I don't like having somebody else make those decisions for me that I can't really impact. I don't want to control my own destiny, a lot of people like to say. And so that was when I really started flirting with the idea of starting my own business. And, when I was affected there by the financial crisis, I decided to go and really kind of into the self-reflection and figure out what exactly do I want to get into. And what I ended up in, it was technology and healthcare. And that led me down a path to working for an organization in pharmacy software. And I made a lot of great connections there. One of the great connections I made was a good friend of mine, and when I was in the healthcare space, he had left the healthcare. He actually ran the company that I worked for at the time, and he went off and bought some ice cream shops in Florida. And so I thought he was crazy, and I stayed in the healthcare space. And it wasn't long until he convinced me to come over and start a business with him and start franchising that business. And so, around that time, I also started flirting with franchising again, getting back into it in terms of actually becoming a franchise broker, helping people find franchises. And so that's what created Pacific Franchise Advisors. So now here we are. We're helping build a brand. We're helping people find franchises, and we help franchises in many different ways. And so we kind of refer to ourselves as a franchise support enterprise.
Yeah, I love that overview for so many reasons, Andy. Chief of which, I say it on the show so frequently, is that I'm sure in those moments, you didn't know these twists and turns that were to come. It always sounds like it makes perfect sense, and it sounds like it makes logical orderly sense when we're talking about it in hindsight, but it shows how many different paths you took to get there, and one connection changed everything for you. So I love hearing that. Heck, maybe one podcast episode will change everything for one listener out there. So I love your story on a personal level. Last week, we had Richard Parker on the show where we talked about buying existing businesses. And I think it's fun to continue that theme here in January of talking about different ways that you can start your own business, one of which is franchising. I teased it in the intro. You write on your website, franchising is a matter of going into business for yourself, but not by yourself. Obviously, there is that foundation of brand recognition in most markets, of having signage, branding. That's a big thing that so many newer entrepreneurs face. What was it like for you? Why is it that you fell in love with the franchise model as opposed to, obviously it can be a bit of a long slog just starting from scratch. Walk us through the great aspects of franchising.
Yeah, the reason I'm attracted to it really simply is kind of that my background, right? Of having the financial crisis, I was laid off. And so I wanted to be in charge of my own destiny. I wanted to wake up and report to myself, look in the mirror, and that's who I report to. And so the great part about franchising is you don't have to come up with any kind of idea. A lot of people like to think, kind of come up with an idea and then I got to start a business, but not a lot of people know where to start. Franchising kind of takes care of all of that. And you get the playbook on how to run the business. You get the brand that it goes along with. And you just get to put your hard work out there for yourself and benefit for yourself. And so, you typically have a great team behind you, a corporate team that can support you on the marketing pieces and even accounting pieces. It depends on where you're not as comfortable when it comes to business. Maybe that's the accounting piece. I don't personally like that part of it, but it's just, you have that support in franchising. So that's the great part about it.
Yeah, I want to ask you this, Andy, because I'm sure every conversation that you have starts with this one basic question, which is a lot of people, obviously, we know what franchising is. We've walked into a Subway and seen franchising opportunities available, but I'm sure inevitably people's first question is, well, what do I franchise? Obviously, we see the most visible ones, calling on Subway, one of the largest franchises in the world, but how do we identify the ones that may be right for us? And actually beyond that, how do we even know what opportunities are out there as opposed to just seeing the blatant obvious ones in front of us?
Yeah, that's a good question. I get asked that all the time. Where are the good opportunities and exactly how do I find them? They're hard to find. A lot of them, there's a lot of sites out there that advertise them. And, what you do is you request more information and you potentially could end up on a call list. The best resource is, I hate to sound self-serving, but it's to come to somebody like me who this is what I do. I research franchises. I get to know who they are and what they are. And, even kind of some of the tricks of, how to vet those out a little bit. And so, a lot of the franchise brands, which one for you? The best way I can answer that, because I get asked that all the time. A lot of people come to me, I want to have this brand because I think it'll be great. And they don't have any experience or they don't have a network in that area. And so that's really where I like to start. Where's your network? Where's your experience? And let's leverage those opportunities there. And let's find a franchise that fits you there. Let's not fit you into a franchise. Let's fit a franchise to you and what you have. And so that'll typically lead us down a path. And it really is custom catered to that individual and specific needs and goals that they have.
Yeah, I'm going to call out right here. I don't think it's self-serving, Andy. That's why we trust your expertise. That's why we bring in experts just like you. And it's so cool that we get to hear these things firsthand from you so that when the time is right for people to say, I want to take this more seriously, they have those trusted advisors. I think it's super important. And I love that last point about not fitting you into a franchise, but finding a franchise that fits you. What are some of those considerations? Because people probably don't even realize, if I open a Subway shop, all of a sudden, am I just going to become a millionaire overnight? We hear these success stories. How much work is involved? Do I hire all of it out? What are those considerations of a sandwich shop versus an ice cream store versus all the thousands, I'm sure, of different franchises out there?
Yeah, the considerations that we usually look at, of course, there's the financial pieces. How much do you have available to you to invest? And even more so, what can you afford to lose? Because it's a venture, right? It's not a guarantee. And so, we look at those, of course, and then we help people down the path of getting financed and get the money in place in order to pursue that opportunity. But I usually like to start with the individual, and really saying, okay, here are the opportunities that make sense for you because, you've never run a franchise, you've never run a restaurant before, so let's not put you in that Subway. Maybe what we need to do is look into a business service or a home service franchise. A lot of home services out there, a lot of home service franchise do very well and give you the opportunity to grow it into what we like to call the executive model, where you're not, you may not be turning a wrench, but you're running those opportunities and you're overseeing that operation so that need can be available in your community. So it really kind of depends, and that's how we dig into it. We dig into the personal background, goals. What is it that you want to accomplish? What's the why behind what you want to do and why you want to be an entrepreneur, or why you want to start a franchise? Where is that, and how do we help you through that to be able to really dig into that big point?
Yeah, Andy, I knew it wouldn't be long before you brought up the F word, which is the word that I'm sure everybody's wondering when it comes to franchising. And that is, of course, financing. I'm sure that you're asked about this all the time. I have a tendency, I'm not going to lie, I kind of geek out when I walk into a franchise location and I see those placards for franchising opportunities available. I always Google what the franchise fee is. And I would imagine, Andy, I've never looked into it, I would imagine that's only one piece of a much bigger puzzle. Talk to us about the financing behind franchising.
Yeah, so there's the franchise fee is just the initial franchise fee. And then generally speaking, that's going to cover your training, your onboarding. That's going to get you essentially becoming a franchisee. And so that's where they'll train you. That's where you'll get the operations manual. And that's where the real work begins. So the franchise fee is just one of the fees and one of the things you have to pay in order to become a franchisee and a business operator. The rest, you're talking about different things like leases and equipment and uniforms and software and hardware, all the other things that you would need to run the business. So that range is usually pretty broad reaching at times. So you can go in there and see an investment range, for example, from $100,000 to $400,000 for a franchise, and the franchise fee is $50,000 of that. Everything beyond that is itemized in their FDD, their franchise disclosure document, which they're legally required to have available to you at a certain point in the process. But that franchise fee should typically be included in that investment range, and that investment range includes the franchise fee, but it's not exclusive to the franchise fee, if that makes sense.
Yeah, for sure. I think it's something that we all inherently understand. For example, let's pick on the mortgage industry. When we see prices of what a house is going to cost you, we all have our general rules of thumb. I guess back in the day, it used to be 20% down payment, and then you've got your mortgage on top of that. Whereas the franchise world is a bit of a mystery for so many people. And I feel like a lot of people are eager to explore it because I'm willing to bet it's more accessible than a lot of us think when it comes to starting a business. Or heck, Andy, the more that I'm talking to you today, I'm almost thinking about the entrepreneurs who maybe have gotten burned out from an agency that they were running, but they accrued a lot of entrepreneurial business executive experience and expertise that they have there that they could leverage in a business that already has that foundation. You're starting with that leg up. Talk to us about what it takes to actually go into it. So when you're throwing out these numbers, such as, a franchise might cost you $100,000 to $400,000, how much of that do we actually need to put down? How does it actually work to get started? Is it an application process? I guess I'm super curious about the beginning stages of even going down this path.
Yeah, typically the way that I work with my clients is we get to know each other. We have a conversation talking about their background. We get some information together and build a profile. And then what we'll do is we'll go and look out into our database. There's about 7,000 franchises out there, anywhere from 4,000 to 7,000. I know it's a crazy range there, but it just depends on what you're reading and where you're looking. So there's a lot to sort out. And usually what we start with is, those financial figures. We don't want to put anybody into something they can't afford and puts them at any kind of financial risk. And so we start there, but then we whittle it down into really what do they want to do and what are their opportunities what's that why, right? And so there's a couple of other options to look at in franchising too. We all know the owner-operator model. That's the one where you're opening up the doors, you're closing the doors at night, and you're there and you live there, and that's your business. There's also the executive model, and that's another one where, for lack of a better term, you manage managers. And so that's maybe you have a restaurant or multiple restaurants or multiple retail sites, whatever that might be. And then the next one is semi-passive, and that's one where you're going to have that system that doesn't require a lot of day-to-day operations, or maybe you're just able to install a manager, and that's what you can do. So that's another way to really kind of whittle down what we need and what we're looking for. And the more, I guess I should back up and say, the less involved you want to be, the more expensive it's going to be, because somebody has to be there to protect that investment of yours, and it needs to be somebody that you trust. And so that's something worthwhile to keep in mind as well. But beyond that, we look into understanding what it is that you are good at, what you want to do, what you're passionate about. You don't want to wake up in the morning and go to a job where you're working for yourself now. You want to get up excited in the morning. You're going to pursuing a goal, pursuing a vision, pursuing something greater than what you're trying to walk away from.
Yeah, I love that perspective, Andy. I also love that you called that out so clearly for us here today and transparently, of the realities of, it's not just you're going to buy something on the cheap and you're not going to be involved and just money's going to start pouring from the ceiling when you wake up in the morning. It's obviously not the way that it works. And I love that you call out those realities of that situation, which I'm going to come back to in a second. But first things first, I want to paint that longer term picture, because from my perspective, Andy, and I'm sure you're going to shed a lot of light on a belief that I've held for probably 20 years now, is that I remember as a young kid, we would just be driving. I was, in the car with my parents. And I remember, I'll never forget, in my suburb in Massachusetts, seeing the biggest house I've ever seen before. And I said to my parents, what did that person do to get that amount of money? And the answer was, everybody knew in town that this person scaled a franchise, and they had 23 franchise locations. It's New England. Of course, it was Dunkin' Donuts. And that's how they grew. And ever since that age, Andy, when we talk about scaling businesses, we talk about scaling one business, but I particularly like the franchise model because you can franchise even more locations. Talk to us about that scalability. Is that kind of the path forward when it comes to the franchising model? Is it growing one franchise location? What does that scaling look like?
Absolutely. There's a lot of ways that you can take that approach and that strategy. And I would say that the restaurant industry is really the one that we're all most familiar with, right? I mean, you can get systems in place for yourself, for your own business, and scale them up. And so maybe you're starting something like a Dunkin' Donuts, and then it goes to a McDonald's or whatnot. But having those centralized operations for yourself, you can get broader with your reach. So you can have multiple brands, but it doesn't just have to be in the restaurant space. A lot of people that I talk to, they want to stay away from restaurants because it's a tough business, and it really is. But there are other things that you can do and other avenues to take. Maybe it's in home services, maybe it's in business services. There are those different avenues. And once you scale, there's a couple ways to do that. Number one, you can buy another territory. That's kind of the simple and easy way. It's like, hey, I figured it out here, so I'm going to go down and I'm going to go buy another territory. And that's also, by the way, kind of a tip on how you can judge a successful franchise brand is, are there franchisees buying more territories? That's how you kind of use that. You look at that metric to say, okay, this is scalable. It's proven to be scalable. And so that's one worth pursuing. And the other way to do that is to start out by buying an area, being an area developer. And then you really, at that point, you're recruiting in franchisees into your area, and you're helping them grow their franchise. And then beyond that, there's, outside internationally, it's more of a master franchisee where you, for all intents and purposes, are the franchisor. You just are the master franchisor, so that you're that one extra layer in between, but you're offering all that support, you're offering all that guidance to those franchisees. That's typically what you see when there's different companies that are trying to go into other countries. Those are more common that way. But those are, scalability is certainly an important piece. I also like to look at things such as, your current Rolodex, so to speak, right? It's an old school term, but if you can scale that, So that's another way to look at it. So if you have a business services franchise, maybe there's another one that we can find that you can additionally add on to what you're doing, so you can, dig a little deeper in the pockets of your clients and offer them better services under one roof.
Yeah, listeners, do you see why we've been so excited to bring Andy onto the show, to have him be the one that introduces us to the world of franchising? There's so many different considerations. Andy, I'm going to praise you big time as a podcast host here today. You are making my life easy because you are introducing us to areas where, for example, myself and a lot of listeners, we may not be able to ask the right questions, but you shed so many answers on us and expose us to things that we might not even be considering. And with that in mind, I also appreciate how much you bring us to the harsh realities of the situation and things we may not consider. Along those lines, Andy, I'm sure a lot of people are thinking, well, that must be the easy route. We've been using, you're right, we keep sticking to the restaurant business, but let's say I buy any franchise, it must be plug and play. They give me the marketing, they give me the brochures, they give me the branding, and I make money. What are those harsh realities? Because I know there's some intricacies where you have to do work. You have to actively invest in making this a success. What does that look like on behalf of the franchisee? What are our obligations when we start this franchise? Not just obligations legally, but obligations to make it work.
It's funny. I heard an analogy not long ago or read it. I can't remember exactly where, but they said, if you want to start a business and you want to invest your money, it's a lot like having kids and going through that process of saying you're going to have kids. You can't just say, I'm having kids sounds fun. And once they're there, you're like, you know what, let's hire a nanny and just have that nanny just take care of all the rest, right? A business is very much the same. If you're going to put that risk out for yourself, you've got to be involved on a very regular basis. And that's where the harsh reality comes that I see. A lot of people want to come to me and say, hey, I need a side hustle, or I want to make money, but I don't want to leave my job. They want that security of their job, or that perceived security, so to speak, and the revenue of a business. And so it's that perception that I usually have to challenge of, nothing really comes without hard work. You can't just buy one and just build it and they will come. There's work you got to put into it. These franchises, they're going to expect you to be the name and face, the brand ambassador for that brand in your territory. And you've got to be that one person that everybody thinks of when they think of that brand or whatever it is. And you've got to build your network that you can benefit from. And it's hard to do that when you're trying to carry so many different loads and try and do different things. You only have so much time. So the hard work, investing yourself and into your business and really diving into it 100%. That's where a lot of that perception tends to be a challenge that I tend to deal with.
Yeah, which is true for all of us in all of our businesses. Everybody, this advice from Andy is relevant for every single wantrepreneur, all the way up to $100 million entrepreneurs. We all need to go all in on those things. There's nothing easy. If this was a cheat code, then literally everybody would be the world's most successful franchisee. We would all have 50 different franchises under our belts, but there's so much work that goes into it. Andy, along those lines, because I think that this, especially coming here in January, I think it's going to be an opportunity for entrepreneurs and wantrepreneurs to look at their own life portfolio and say, is this something I want to go down this path and add it into my mix? But I feel kind of bad because I'm limiting our conversation today to so many restaurant industry franchises that we all know. And they're, of course, the most visible ones that we all see. Shed some light on some of the lesser known ones, because you've already mentioned business services, for example. And I'm thinking about so many great, like I turn to Minuteman Press as a franchise that I don't even think about as a franchise. To me, it's a local business that I turn to for printing needs. Shed some light on some of those franchise opportunities that maybe are in person locally, but I'm sure there are also some online that people don't even realize are opportunities.
Yeah, you see a lot in the home services space. Some of my favorites are the System Ford America brands, mainly because, I know those folks. I've met those folks, spent a lot of time with them and helped people into that franchise system. And they help their franchisees. I mean, they support them 100% and they're behind them 100%. And so that's the Temperature Pro, so HVAC, Plumbing Pro, plumbing, of course, and then Papa Lock, a mobile locksmith franchise. You see other ones out there in business services. So, some out there, a company by the name of Schooley Mitchell that I tend to work with fairly often is, cost mitigation, right? So they work with companies and do cost reduction analysis for them, and then they actually share in the cost savings. So what an easy sale that is, right? Let me take a look at your financials. We'll analyze them, and if we can save money, then we'll just share that savings, and that's how we're going to make money. And it's residual income, right? And so that's another. You got a lot in the automotive space, oil changing, things like that. Vending machines are also a popular one for those people that do want the side hustles, and that makes sense. There's some things to talk through about those first before I want people to really dive into those ones. But again, there's still work involved. It's not just a plug and play. Of course, again, restaurants and so there's plenty of other options out there, really. And I think there's probably a category in every different space. And I'm seeing even some come up in the solar area, which I'm kind of excited to see what that industry does.
Yeah, I'm excited that I asked you that because I think, again, it proves we don't know what we don't know. And that's the value. Andy, I'm going to continue to toot your horn, is that for those of us who has never been in the world of franchising, if you're thinking about this is why you want someone like Andy in your corner, because holy cow, none of us know these answers. So I appreciate your insights. And of course, you're leveraging so much experience that you personally have in this space. So it makes sense that this stuff appears so natural to you, but it comes from all of that experience. Andy, one thing that listeners know that we do here at the show is we always ask our guests beforehand, what is your zone of genius? And it really makes me excited to see your answer. You didn't even hesitate. Your authenticity in sales and relationships. And that's music to my ears because I think that that's something that's prevalent and important across all industries, franchise or non-franchise. Talk to us about how that term of authenticity, it's obviously such an important piece of business advice that entrepreneurs of all levels, and especially you entrepreneurs out there, that you need to hear. How does that play into the work that you do? Because obviously franchising is about leveraging existing brands, but Andy, showing up authentically shapes naturally the way that we show up in the world and our employees, our teams, the way that our customers experience us. I'd love to hear your insights into why that is so important in your line of work.
Yeah, I think one of the biggest struggles I had before I ever decided to take the leap into entrepreneurship was, it's just me. It's all it is. It's just me. When you start out, that's who you are. And so you don't have a brand to hide behind like you do in the corporate world, right? You work for whatever company it might be. It's just you. And I think that's where I learned to lean into that. I'm not the type that's gonna, try to force a sale. I want somebody to actually find a franchise that they're successful in and then they can provide for their family. And those are my favorite experiences. Those are my favorite stories to tell, about the guy who struggled for years to really want to take that leap. And we found a franchise for him. He did it. And the guy is just absolutely thriving right now. And I keep in touch with the people that I talk with. It's not a transaction to me. It's a relationship. And that's where, I am who I am. And I keep that authenticity. I make sure that what I say is what I mean, and it's the truth, and I can back that up. So that to me is really the value of being authentic. I think we can be tempted to hide behind this personal brand that we might be wanting to put out there on LinkedIn or what have you. But when it all comes down to it, my favorite conversations with people, and I try to be this person, are the ones that I can just sit and talk with, and know that person is being real with me.
Yeah, I appreciate hearing you talk about that, Andy, because I think I can say, as someone who's had the chance of having a conversation with you here today, it shows up in the way that you show up, is that there's no smoke and mirrors. And I think that's why we've been so picky in so many regards. That's why listeners tune into this show, is because everybody knows we are incredibly picky in the way that we select guests, especially across all industries. I think we all need to be picky about where we get advice from in this world, because especially in today's world where everyone's a TikTok and Instagram expert and guru, we all need to be careful about those things that we hear. So it's really great hearing that. I want to ask you about timeline, because I think that's something that you painted the picture of a real life example of someone who for years was just like, I want to do this. I want to do this. And our audience is full of them. Wantrepreneurs, we love all of you because you're just one decision, one piece of action away from changing your life and taking action and becoming an entrepreneur. Andy, what's the timeline of becoming a first-time franchisee, for example? Do I decide today and then start the research process, maybe reach out to someone like you, and then a month from now I am a franchisee? Is this a 1 year long thing? Walk us through the timeline.
Gosh, it depends on so many people, right? I mean, really do have to make the decision for yourself that you're willing to take that risk, and that's a decision that you got to be honest with yourself about. A lot of people say, "I'm ready, I can do it, I'm good to go," and then it comes down to it. It's like, all right, time to write a check, and that fear comes into place, and that's a very normal fear. But it's one that people need to anticipate if they're going to go down that road and be prepared for, and be prepared to take that leap. I always tell people, when I was younger, and my buddies and I would go, jump off waterfalls or you name it. And, it's very similar to that. It's that feeling once you're on top and you're looking down, it's like, gosh, I don't want to do it now that I'm here, but there's really only one way down. And you sometimes just got to take that deep breath, look back, and then just take that jump. And that's really kind of what that decision tends to look like. But make that decision really before you invest your time in the research. You got to invest your time in yourself, got to invest your time in really asking yourself and going through this self-analysis to say, am I ready? What am I ready for? And you don't have to have all the answers in terms of what it's going to be, but definitely have a good idea of what your motivations are and why you're doing what you want to do, because that's what's really going to be the guide to the entire process. And really, at the end of the day, it's going to have a lot to do with the success of your business.
Yeah, again, really good advice. Andy, you have a really unique way of making this advice universally true for entrepreneurs and business owners in all different industries. So I really respect your perspective on that. I want to ask you this. As we're coming to time, I don't usually ask this question, but I want to sneak it in with you because you have so much experience in this domain. And that is, what's something that you wish you knew earlier? Obviously, you as someone who's owned franchises, you must look at beginner franchisees. And I get to do this with beginner entrepreneurs who I get to interact with a lot. And I'm just like, oh gosh, it took me a while to learn this. But now that I know this, I can so clearly see it in your naivety when it comes to this stuff. What's that thing for you that you wish you knew sooner?
Gosh, I wish I would have known about franchising sooner, I guess. I mean, it's, I think I was always kind of waiting around for that good idea to just kind of, lightning to strike my brain of, oh, here it is. And here's that one great idea. And then all that venture capital is just going to flow in. I think just find something and get it started. Don't wait to start. Just get going, use it, get a franchise to do it. There's no reason not to. It's all right there. You can learn everything you need to. And I think the best way to get an MBA is going out and running a business. You don't need to go in the necessarily get one at school, but that's the path for some people, and that's great. But I think in other ways, at least when it comes to me, I wished I would have gotten that experience much sooner in running a business.
Yes, amen to that. You are preaching to the choir here today, Andy. I've been dropping that Mark Twain quote so frequently this year. Don't let school get in the way of your education. I started my first business when I was in business school, and I stopped going to class. Why? Because I was running a business. I was learning real life business. So I absolutely love that piece of advice. And for a lot of people, this, like I said, I hope it's the wake up call here in January. It's the beginning of the year. There's an opportunity for a lot of people. And I want to highlight the one thing that you said, Andy, that I've never thought of franchising in this way, which is it is the antidote, especially for those people who are sitting there saying, well, I don't have a business idea. It's one of the highest objections that I hear from wantrepreneurs and newer entrepreneurs as they struggle with that idea. This is an immediate answer to that idea. So I absolutely love that advice. And Andy, with that said, I love giving my guests the hardest part of the episodes, which is somehow summarizing one takeaway, one action that you love for everyone to walk away from this episode from. I know we talked about a lot of things. This is probably an introduction to franchising for so many people who have been thinking about it. What's that one thing that you hope they do or think about or consider or take action on after this episode?
I mean, don't be afraid to take that leap. It's just like we talked about just now. I mean, it's the antidote, right? I love how you put it that way, Brian. It's the antidote to that great idea that you think you're waiting for. Just why wait? Go do it, right? You only live once. But, at the end of the day, I'm kind of also a John Wooden fan with my background in basketball and everything. And, one of my favorite things that he likes to say too is there's no substitute for hard work. So you can work hard for somebody else. You can work hard for yourself. And I certainly am a big advocate for working for yourself. I genuinely believe the world would be a better place if we all just use our own gifts and made money doing it somehow.
Yes, that right there. You just encapsulated everything that Wantrepreneur to Entrepreneur stands for, and I so appreciate those insights. Andy, I know that listeners are going to be keen to go deeper into exploring you, your work, everything that Pacific Franchise Advisors can help people with if they are eager to go down the franchising path. Drop those links on us. Where should listeners go from here to start getting into this incredible world of franchising and leveraging expertise like someone like you?
Yeah, pacificfranchiseadvisors.com is our website. And by all means, drop me an email. And it's pretty simple. It's just abaker@pacfranchise.com, pacfranchise.com. So I'd love to hear from people. I'd love to get a couple emails every now and then and have that conversation, even if they're just wanting to kick some ideas around.
Heck yes. I love that generous offer. I love when guests drop their email address. Listeners, don't be shy. Andy's saying that because he really wants to hear from you. His business website is at pacificfranchiseadvisors.com. Wherever it is that you're tuning into today's episode, scroll right on down and you will find that link. Otherwise, Andy, on behalf of myself and all the listeners around the world, thanks so much for coming on and being so generous with your knowledge here today on the Wantrepreneur to Entrepreneur podcast.
Thanks, Brian.